Okay. When did you know that you wanted to be an architect?
I grew up in a little town in Iowa. It really had 1,432 people, and we had farmers and
Hmm.
lawyers, preachers, and construction people. So I was really in high school before I ever went to cities, and I was in college before I thought about being anything but a lawyer because
Yeah.
my dad and my granddad were small town lawyers, and that's what they wanted me to do.
Hmm.
I'm of an age that I was in college during, well, I was in middle school and high school and high school during civil rights and Vietnamese War stuff beginning. And then I was in college really when we were doing a lot of demonstrations about all of those things. And somewhere in the midst of all that, I ran into a group of friends who were architects.
Hmm.
I realized I was gonna, after about my junior year, I realized I was gonna call home and tell my father I was sorry, I wasn't gonna be a lawyer. I was gonna be an architect. And I didn't know very much about it, but I knew that I loved buildings and places and cities. And so that's what I decided to do. No family help, really, just hunkering down and working hard and trying to figure out if you really were going to like this profession
Yeah.
that you had to go to school for a long time to graduate into. But I did it and I love it and I never looked back.
Yeah.
So I got a job down in Washington, D.C., working for Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, but they weren't doing any big high rise buildings. They were doing things like the Washington Mall. And so I really fell in love with the fact that architecture can be about the city, it can be about large spaces. It isn't just about buildings that make a lot of money for people who are already rich. It
Yeah.
really can have community and social goals. And at the time, and I must say for the rest of my practicing life, that would be what's important to me. The real thrill, there's a real thrill when you see your building go up and you see people walking through the doors and
Yeah.
starting to use it and
Yeah.
how they're responding and whether they're responding the way you imagined they would, which often they don't. But what's really really fun is when you and your client take equal pride in what you've accomplished, and when you see people who really think that you've done something special, something inspiring that makes them stop and think differently about whatever, about how much they love stone or how great it is that we have this nice a train station in our city now when we used to have that really crappy one. Those are the real rewards. Not standing on stage and getting awards from other people. That's nice. You know, it builds your portfolio and it impresses sometimes the people who are interviewing you and other firms. But what's the best part of it is to know when something that inspired you inspires other people who get to use it.
Yeah. I agree. Um, do you have a specialty? What types of projects do you enjoy to work on?
Um, so when I was in architecture, the operative phrase was the A in architecture stands for art. And the charge to the profession and to its leading designers and into design schools of that in those days was, it's your goal to make it beautiful.
Hmm.
And therefore, my firm, Skimmer Wings and Merrill, part of our market pitch was we do we do we do we do cities in the morning and spoons in the afternoon. That every aspect of life has something about design in it. But I think maybe that's a little too expansive because I do think there are many, many different types of architectures that we can do. Some people are better at smaller or larger. Some people develop an affinity for a particular subject matter. And I've already told you that I didn't particularly want to work on high rise buildings, especially if they weren't part of a place in the city or
Yeah.
a complex in the city. Like you look at Rockefeller Center and you know it's a group of buildings, but you also know that from the first stages of conceptualizing that place, someone was caring about the whole and about the space in between and about the public places that could be used at the bases, and how people got in and out of the building. So sometimes you choose, and sometimes a project comes along and chooses you.
Hmm.
And in my case, I was working on some projects in Washington, D.C., and we were on the 12th floor of a building, and there was a big engineering company on the 10th floor.
Yeah.
Their name was DCP, Duluth Cather Parsons. And they were run by a really crusty but ultimately nice ex-general who had been in the Army Corps. And he came up to our floor one day to say, the Federal Railroad Administration is about to build a higher speed train in the Northeast Corridor from Washington, D.C. to Boston. And I hear you've done some work on Union Station. And I said, yes, I have. He said, well, I want you to be the head of the stations for the whole team that we're putting together to do this project. So I went from thinking that I really liked small gardens and small houses and designing neighborhoods to being on the team that actually won that project. And I spent the next, from 1974 to about 1989 running that project. Not running only that project, but it was our charge to build a team that could investigate the 26 stations along railroad, pick the top 15, come up with design standards, signs, counter details, passenger processing, save 8 historic buildings by getting them on the historic register, and then completing the construction documents, overseeing the construction, and being there for opening day. And to me, that ability to go all the way through the process, not just design something in the beginning and turn it over to other people to execute, that was really what I thought was fun. You didn't ask this precisely, thank you. But of course, for most of the time, I was the only woman on the design team, the only woman running one of the major parts of the program, definitely the only woman on the site. And that there were always men who were curious enough about me or impressed that I was willing to be there, that and teach me the language of the railroad, teach me about frogs and crossovers and all the language you need to know to communicate with the engineers. And that was really a turning point for me. And so as I advanced that project and we had good teams going, I made a proposal to go after the extension of Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. I'd never done an airport. I'd done a lot of flying. And lo and behold, we won that job. So I think that was about from 1982 to, well, we went on working for them for 20 years, but we extended the main Sarandon building. We persuaded the client to keep that to be the major head house for the whole airport. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but when you drive toward Dulles Airport from Washington, you see the Blue Ridge Mountains in the back, and you see this beautiful Aero Sarandon building, which we saved for the future by making it twice as long as it was and adding a lot more gates. And so I think I like the things that are technical, that are public. And for me, concentrating on transportation, which wasn't something that any of my other partners wanted to do, gave me my own voice in the firm and pretty much with my other partners a chance to lead that whole practice area. So I specialized by choice, not because the market was forcing it. And I think, like one of your questions at the end, what advice do you give? Stay curious. Don't become a specialist until you really know what you want to do. Architecture is a broad profession with so many different things you can do in it. And you have to take the time to learn what's really your fit and what's really your passion.
Yeah. Cool. What is one of your proudest accomplishments?
Um, One of the stations that I worked on in the Northeast Corridor was Philadelphia 30th Street, which was such a wreck when we got there. It had cork roofs. It was a late Art Deco project, following on some others in other cities, and it was handsomely and beautifully built. But over the years, it got too big, fewer people rode the railroads, and therefore, all the functions sort of hunkered in the middle, and it was pretty dark and dreary. And so bringing that to life was really nice. But actually, what was really most exciting for me was well, I also loved working on Union Station in Washington, D.C., but the one that really won my heart is Baltimore. Baltimore Penn Station is a very little building, classical building, very beautiful. It had um, stained glass skylights, beautiful ornate brass fixtures, beautiful wood benches, and it also had just fallen into disrepair. And when the whole thing got done, our kids, I guess that time they were probably about 11 and 7. So we got on the train and we rode up to Baltimore and got off the train because I wanted to show them what the station was like. And my husband was there too. And we were walking around for a while and there were a lot of people there. And then a woman came in with her 2 small children that were about maybe 8 and 5, a little younger than our kids. And she walked them into the middle of the room and she told them to look up and see the skylights and look at how beautiful it was. And she just said to her children, this city gave us this train station. Isn't it wonderful we had a place like this? And I was maybe 32 years old or something when that happened. And it just stuck with me always because that's what you hope for all the people that
Yeah.
walk through your buildings, even if you don't get to meet them personally.
Yeah. Cool. What were some of your biggest challenges?
The biggest challenge is that when you get out of architecture school, you've built a lot of models and you've built mock-ups and you've drawn a lot and you've sketched and you rendered and I had my education before the computer came into play, but then for years I was bringing people into the firm who were already good in technology and we were all blending in with them. But the thing is that architecture school doesn't teach you how to solve every problem.
Hmm.
It teaches you how to solve a few problems, but what it mostly does is it gives you the research skills and the curiosity skills to say to yourself, I don't know how to do this project, but I can learn. I can do it. I can figure it out. And I distinctly remember a day when one of the partners came over and yanked me away from my desk and said, I needed to talk to you. And when that happened in the very male-oriented Skimmerings and Merrill, you were almost certain you'd done something wrong.
Yeah.
But I was seated in the office and the partner said to me, well, I know you like working on the project you're working on right now, but tomorrow you're going to start on another one. And he described to me this hugely complicated project. And it had to do with working on the Air Force Academy out in Colorado Springs, which is something that my predecessor partners did, and it's an extraordinarily beautiful place. And you're going to be in charge of all of our work there. We're going to do a new building. They want you to recover some of the things that have happened that have been bad. You're just going to love this job. And I thought about it, and I thought about it that night. I was probably up all night. And I practiced talking into the mirror and saying, I'm sorry, I just don't think I don't think I'm ready to take on a job like that. And then as I walked into the office to go meet this partner, I had another thought, which is the partners of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill are not going to let me fail. So maybe, just maybe, I should try. Mm. And I did. And once you do that, once you sort of conquer the fear of starting, things become a whole lot easier. But it does recur over and over again. Am I the right person for this job? Can I build the right team for this job? Even when you're out pitching work in sometimes, which you have to turn it into a research project and make it really fun to do. Because then you give a better presentation, and maybe you're lucky if you win one in three, but if you're really lucky, you win the one out of the three you really wanted. It's very competitive getting the work, and that's a challenge. And I didn't ever like selling myself, but I got to a point where I could sell my team and the work we were going to do and the concept we had. And from then on, it became a question for me, the challenge of really building good teams where you can give the other people you're working with a lot of chances to participate in design.
What classes do you recommend high school students take if they're interested in studying architecture in college?
Well, I would say a couple of things are obvious. I would say the fine arts,
Hmm.
uh, both looking at it, hearing it, engaging in it, but also doing it. Um, Learning the eye to hand connection, drawing, even though it's quicker and faster and there are already presets all in the computer for you to use, it's a really good idea to make that connection between your brain and your hand as the formative creative act. It for me, it's always worked, and most of the people I know still reduce to sketching when they're trying to communicate ideas quickly, rather than to just turn them into powerful images that may not be as well thought through. But maybe the rest of my answer will surprise you. Read a lot of history, especially history of cities. Uh, Read biographies or autobiographies of people who become leaders, especially in arts and creative fields. They tell stories that will motivate you at the times you need it. Um, almost anything that builds your curiosity, and start down the road of being able to face your fears and make a good, strong speech, presenting your idea, presenting your concept, presenting how you feel about a particular issue. I think until you get into your 20s or so, even though people are in a hurry to be educated and to get out into work, this is an important time to take your time and become broadly knowledgeable. But as I said before, I think the most important word, build your curiosity, understand what makes you curiosity. Maybe you like horse tracks. Maybe you like space stations. Maybe like me, you just like plain old train stations. But you begin to find the things that really motivate you. And then, if you're lucky, travel a lot.
Yeah.
Begin to recognize the differences in cities. That traveling a lot could mean going to Cincinnati. It's a lot more fun going to Madrid. But get to know places and what makes them feel like a place that people want to be.
Yeah.
And then you can think about either majoring in architecture in college or going the route where at least your course of education is 6 years and not five. There are very few 5-year schools left. The problem with 5-year schools, they can be tremendously good in technology and also in design, but you need the references in the world of art. You need a common knowledge of literature. You need a sense of cultural history and a way to, when you go to a culture you're familiar with, how to jump in and learn about it before you impose your design from your own value sets. So my recommendation generally is to go to a place where you have 2 years of liberal arts or science or engineering or whatever else you want to do, and then a place where you can take some architecture courses in your junior, senior year. That can, in some programs, lead you into 2 more years when you graduate. You can also go through college and then go to a 3-year program of architecture, which is what we have at UPenn and what most of the Ivy League schools have. It's the state schools that tend to have a 5 or 6-year program because you're there and you're through and you're ready to go out to work. But the most of the East Coast schools adapted their architecture programs from the English and the French, where you really went and studied classics and then moved on into the world of design. So, from where you are right now, that may sound like a really long path, but I urge you to consider it.
I will. Nice. Um, do you see any differences in the challenges that my generation will face from those that your generation faced?
You know what? To be truthful, because I'm a mom, I both envy the opportunities you'll have and worry about it.
Hmm.
Um, there are so many forces flying around, and of course, what we in design, in the fields of design, not just architecture, think is technology is here to be our partner too. It's here to enable our abilities to conceive a building, draw it, design the details, see it through construction. But other people, engineers, contractors, real estate developers, see technology as ways to speed up the process, don't spend so much on design fees, do something that's a little bit safer rather than something that's a little bit more pushing forward what the capacities of materials and materials systems and our own imaginations are. And it's a constant struggle, which generally you've built a firm, you have people who depend on you to keep it going, so you need to get jobs. But what I hope for is the first image that technology is spread to make all of the players in the design and building real estate industries and governmental planning departments to make us all work together better. I completely believe in cross-disciplinary thinking. The people who only do architecture, Bob Stern at Yale, loves to preach. Fortunately, I mean, he was a great dean in his own way, but he thought there was only architecture, and he thought it was a waste of time to talk about urban design and planning and transportation or even forestry. And they have a fantastic forestry school at Yale, which would be such a great thing to collaborate with. So I think the best opportunity for you and others in your generation who are rising in the design fields is to become very friendly with technology, very capable with technology, but also I'm going to not think about what went on today on Capitol Hill as I say this, but it's almost hard to keep it out of our lives now. Um, to understand that what we all of us who are leaders and who are contributors, have to think about what values we're representing in the work we do.
Hmm.
So we do it well. But for instance, you take the courthouses, the classical courthouses and the neoclassical courthouses that were built in the first half of the 20th century. You feel humbled because you have to walk up all those steps in the courtroom, and you feel scared. You feel very small, and I think that it's an example that one of the great challenges is how government presents itself to the people, and the buildings that government inhabits tell everyone a lot about. Can I really go in there in my in my short sleeve T-shirt, wearing sneakers? Yes, increasingly you can, but there's always a risk that not. I don't think democracy would go on, but it might wither.
Hmm.
And while you're an architect, you're also going to be a citizen. You're also going to be someone who's responsible for the future of your community in one way or another. And so it's important to keep that to mind. And if you keep that in your mind, then you, the next generation, are going to have a great time because you're going to be able to build at lower cost and higher performance much better buildings and places than we have.
Nice. When you imagine architecture in the future, like 50 to 100 years from now, what does it look like to you?
Wow, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about this question is I hope you keep in touch on all the client stuff. I was in Singapore
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago. The Straits Times had a big headline on its top page. Over 11,000 scientists say we're failing to meet our goals. Only Europe will, the rest of the world won't, and it's going to be horrible. We have to start changing now. So, what the first thing I hope is that 50 years and more from now, we will have reduced the challenge and the risks that we are now putting into and that are stressing all of our environments, and that we'll be on the road to living in a place where we're healthy because we're able to be outside and enjoying the environment and sharing it with everyone. And the sharing it with everyone is the second equally powerfully difficult thing, which is your generation and the next generation after you will be the ones who equalize things to a much greater extent. I was a person who came from a small town in Iowa. I thought that the things that we, my colleagues, my generation were doing were not only causing us to prosper, but they were going to distribute income and opportunity more evenly. They haven't. And so how people are going to live 50 years from now depends upon how well you all will stand up in pushing through a much more equitable world. Hope you do it. I trust you to do it.
Thanks. I will.
Great. One of the things I started saying to myself, even as I got um, to the point where I was leading more teams and wasn't down in the details as much as before, I always used to understand in my head that I'm happiest when I have my hands in the dirt, at
Yeah.
least figuratively. When you're making something, it just lives with you as you walk around, but in a really, really nice way that keeps reminding you, you got to check that detail. Is the eave right? Did we really pick the right width of the opening? How can we make this better? Can it go up a little? Can we? I mean, all of those things just keep continuing in you, and they may sound trivial, but it's the thousands of little decisions that serve a big project goal. That's what makes great architecture.